Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you had a pleasant break and you are refreshed a little bit. We are now going on with a session called Transculture Session. My name is Ruprecht Mattig, as displayed here on the screen. I'm from Germany, from the TU Dortmund University. And we will have 4 speakers today. And all of us are in some way related, and we have a common research topic. To put it short here, we're doing research about amae, whatever that means. And I deliberately leave it a little bit puzzling here, a little bit open now. We are a kind of joint research team, and we nevertheless have our own presentations and give different perspectives on this research topic. I will start with giving a kind of broader frame how our research is situated, and then we will have some more theoretical considerations and go more and more into the topic of amae. I hope so. So that's the agenda for today. We want to keep every presentation altogether about 30 minutes so that we have these 4 presentations. So let me start. I want to talk a little bit now first about sustainability. We have already heard something about this, so I don't maybe not need to go too deep into this. Yeah, that's it. What is sustainable development? As Professor van der Leeuw said yesterday, this is not only about environment and protecting the environment, but the actual definition of sustainability contains at least 3 elements, and I have a definition by the United Nations that they say sustainable development is a development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And we have talked a lot about environmental problems and about Greta Thunberg and the movement of Fridays for Future, which all point to the aspect that maybe in some years and decades we cannot even live on this planet anymore if we go on like we do now. So sustainability is about environmental protection, but also it is about social inclusion. So what does this mean? Of course, this is a very broad term, and it means that in each society there shouldn't be too big social inequalities, and in international relations there should be no war. There should be peace and peaceful cooperation between the nations. Maybe some of you know that the first international world conference about the protection of environment was in 1913 already. And you all know in 1914 the First World War came up, and then this discussion was shut down. So peace is just a very significant factor for the future development. And economic growth is also an important factor, which applies very much also to the so-called developing countries. What is here very important is that sustainable development is an effort that requires international cooperation. It can only be achieved as a common endeavor of the world society. So it's not enough if only one country puts very big standards on environmental issues, for example, while all the other countries just don't care. So it's really an international problem that has to be solved. Now, the United Nations have defined 17 goals of sustainable development, and I just put them here. Just read them very quickly. First is no poverty. Second, zero hunger. then good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation and infrastructure, reduced inequalities, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, life below water, life on land, peace, justice and strong institutions, and 17 partnerships for the goals. And I don't want to, and I have no time to go into all of them. My field of research is education. I'm a pedagogue or an educational researcher. So the goal number 4 is most interesting for my work, for my research. So this goal is called quality education. And it has several, or let's say, you can say 3 core goals or 3 core targets, this idea of quality education for sustainable development. First of all, we have to consider that education is really the basis for any sustainability, because it's the new generation, the upcoming generations that have to act and that we can form. We just heard this about neuroscience here, right? We can form and we can educate these coming generations so that they hopefully be sustainable. But there are different dimensions of quality education. It's quality education for all. This means everywhere on the world there should be good education for females and males and so on and so on. There should be a specific education for sustainable development so that children learn about the environmental issues, that they learn how to act on environmental issues. But it's not only learning in a cognitive way, but it's also building up green schools, for example, that use less plastic and so on and so on. Yeah? And finally, there's what the United Nations call global citizenship education. And this is what I would like to elaborate upon a little bit more. Global citizenship education, this means that the children should be educated in such a way that they become open-minded towards other cultures, towards the world society, whatever that means. I'd like to consider this together with you. That children do not stick to their own families only and only to their own nations, but open themselves to the world, so that global peace and so on can be, and global cooperation for sustainability can be accomplished. I have another quote. This is from the German UNESCO website, which says, "Quality education is for us an education that achieves the acquisition of relevant knowledge and skills, promotes stable emotional development, and conveys the fundamental values of the United Nations. These values include respect for human rights, democracy, peace, freedom and tolerance, as well as cultural diversity, environmental responsibility, social justice and economic participation. The UNESCO concepts education for sustainable development and global citizenship education do exactly that, with different emphasis. Through the implementation, education helps people to live together in a fair, environmentally responsible and peaceful manner." Maybe I skip this slide and just go to the next slide, because it's quite similar. The idea of a world citizen education is not very new. So this has been put forward already in the 17th century by Johann Amos Comenius, and it has been very much stressed by Immanuel Kant, the German philosopher, who says that modern education should awaken the children an interest in the progress of the world. This seems to be a tricky translation, because progress of the world, it's in German he writes, das Weltbeste, the best for the world. Children should be made acquainted with this interest so that it may give warmth to their hearts. They should learn to rejoice at the world's progress, although it may not be to their own advantage or to that of their country. And for Kant, progress of the world means that eternal peace or peace on this planet between the nations can be secured. And therefore, education shall make sure that individuals dedicate themselves to this idea of eternal peace and to transnational collaboration. And Kant suggests supporting and fostering a feeling of cosmopolitanism in the youth. So now, this is a really difficult task to accomplish, fostering such a feeling of cosmopolitanism, and Kant breaks up his considerations at this point and doesn't go any further into it. So, and I want to elaborate only upon a few points here. So what is the problem, or what are problems to this feeling of cosmopolitanism? There are obvious threats, nationalism, racism, and so on, that really block any feeling of cosmopolitanism. But there's also some more hidden threat or problem. And this is what we would like to consider in our research group, that ethnocentrism can impose certain views on other cultures, especially, of course, Western views on other cultures. For example, we are using here, in this international context, we are using English. That's very nice, because we can communicate across different national borders. But in doing so, we use a specific language, and maybe I should go a little bit into linguistic anthropology, which says, I think Professor van der Leeuw had deliberated about this yesterday already, that every language gives a specific view on the world. Every language gives us categories, but each language is a little bit different, and in each language concepts are linked to another in different ways, and maybe some concepts doesn't even exist in some languages, and so on, right? So this means when we use English, we just use one way of thinking, and all the richness of different ways of thinking is eliminated. So this is the cost for being able to speak together here, right? So there are gains, but there are also losses, which we really and clearly need to address. This is also related to power relations. Yeah, I think it's no big mystery why we use English here. 100 years ago, French was the lingua franca of international communities, right? But then the whole power system of the world changed, and we have now the Anglo-Saxon hegemony, which now America is being made little again, is changing at the moment, but still we have it, yeah? So we need to reflect upon such issues. And that's what we want to do, keeping this tension in mind between the possibility to have a universal communication and the problem of limiting our ways of thinking through this. And we want in our research project to have a transcultural dialogue. We go into this topic a little bit more deeply in the other presentations, so I won't elaborate too much upon transculturality. But what we want to do is we want to think and try to understand another language. And here we go also in educational issues and the problem or the question of how do other cultures think about education as it is embedded in their language. And so we are all interested in Japan or either living in Japan, although we are not Japanese. So we try to approach Japan, which is really difficult, But I think the important thing is just to try. As a foreigner, you may never really get the true understanding of Japan, whatever a true understanding that it is. But you can approach to a certain degree, and that's, in my opinion, that's very important for this idea of sustainability and international peace. I want to give you at least just one example now. Amae. This is a book here, book cover. You see two persons, a woman and a child, probably. And the book title says Amae no Kozo. This was written by a Japanese scholar, Doi Takeo. What does it mean? The people that are not proficient with Japanese may not understand. So I just give you the translation. This has been translated into English as The Anatomy of Dependence. So this book was published in 1971, and this one was published in 1973. So 2 years later, the English translation came. And The Anatomy of Dependence, the key analysis of Japanese behavior. And here you can see that Doi states in this book that amae, whatever that is, but amae seems to be related to dependence, and that Doi states that amae can explain the Japanese behavior, the Japanese psyche, as he also says. And now let's go a little bit further. More than 10 years later, 9 years later, 1982, a German version appeared. Amae, Freiheit in Geborgenheit, zur Struktur japanischer Psyche. So now this is really irritating, because we have freedom in security, Freiheit in Geborgenheit. And this is something really different to anatomy of dependence. And funnily, the German version was not derived from the Japanese original, but from the English translation. So there have been several stages for this translation process. This is an interesting thing, that there seem to change some things, some meanings, if we put some ideas from one language into another language. Yeah? There are transformations, there are even creations of meaning. New meaning emerges in this. And that's the idea of transculturality. In transcultural situations, some new things emerge. That's the idea of this. And we want to, in this way, in the dialogue with Japanese people, and we also have American and Chinese people in our research group, we want to discuss about this idea of amae and how can it be translated into different languages like German, American, Chinese, and so on. Yeah, so I think I should just come to an end and say thank you very much.